In limited release came their video generation model VO 2.0, which is to be better than Sora.
Whisk. It's an image generation model. You can actually upload a few different images, whisks them together to create one image.
Google announced their Gemini 2.0 Flash thinking model.
Google launched a new feature for their Notebook LM product. You can interrupt the podcast and ask questions of the AI host.
OpenAI announced 1-800-ChatGPT, where you can call and just talk to ChatGPT.
Meta has upgraded their smart glasses, and they just announced 3 new features: a live AI, live translations, and is Shazam.
ChatGPT announced that their Mac app can now work with more applications and can work with applications through voice mode. At the NeurIPS conference, OpenAI co-founder Ilya Sutskever stated that AI has reached peak data. Welcome back to What the AI, where we decode the latest developments in the world of artificial intelligence. I'm Jeff Keltner.
And I'm Annie Delgado.
All right, Annie, it's almost Christmas. You got any big plans for Christmas?
Well, big plans this weekend to do all of the last minute Christmas shopping that I need to do. So it's going to be probably a hectic couple of days. And then, I live in the Bay Area in California. So we definitely always have a Bay Area Christmas, driving around to different family segments and, seeing different people. So it's going to be really nice. I'm really excited for some time off. Speaking of time off, you and I are going to take next week off the podcast, so our listeners will get a little break too. I figure
A little break
everyone's
from
going
our
to be.
voices for a week.
That's right. Break from our voices. How about you? You mentioned you're going on a trip.
Yeah, we're taking the kids to New York just for 4 days, like a quick. It's one of those cities where as my kids get older, I'm like, we need to take you there at some point. It's pretty
Yeah.
at Christmas, and the schedule just worked out this year where we could kind of get there for 4 days. My kids are very upset if we're not home for Christmas. Like when we've traveled and been gone on Christmas Day, they get upset.
Yeah.
And so we were happy we could make it there for a couple of days and make it back in time for, because we're back Christmas Eve. We'll be back home.
That's going to be awesome. What is the number one tourist attraction they are excited to see in Manhattan?
I don't know that they've got finals this week, so we haven't, shared too much of the plan. I think they're most excited. We're going to see Stereophonic. My
Okay.
kids are both into music. Love Fleetwood Mac, which I guess is somewhat the inspiration for that show. It seems like it's very Fleetwood Mac-y feel, I guess, to the
Yeah.
band, the behind the scenes band. So they're excited to see that. And then I think just they haven't been to a city that like New York. Not that there are many cities like New York, so I'm just excited for them to like walk around Central Park, see the big buildings, just kind of experience the life in the big city, metro, like actual public transit that you can use to get around a place, which we don't have in Los Angeles. So it should be fun.
Yeah, that'll be incredible. I hope you guys have a great time.
Yeah. Well, let's start this week. We started off last week with OpenAI, their 12 days of OpenAI, but I feel like we got to give Google their due, and maybe we'll start with a Google set of announcements this week because they've really upped their game. Seeming they didn't like pre-call it like Babe Ruth pointing at the window 12 days of shipping, but they've really delivered. And this week in limited release came their video generation model VO 2.0, which for most reviews seems to be better than Sora that OpenAI announced.
Yeah, I saw that too. But why do you think that is? Why are users finding this one to be better than Sora?
So why it's better, I don't know what Google did, the secret sauce, but a lot of the stuff you see people struggling with in video is kind of object permanence, physics. One of the great video examples I saw was slicing steak or slicing tomatoes. They would ask the models, and if you look at Sora, like the knife goes through the fingers, the slices don't fall off when they're done. The tomato, the little green sprout at the top comes back after they finish slicing, it's gone, and then it just like reemerges as the knife comes back out of the tomato. You go, okay, it was really pretty, but like it didn't look right. And Google's was kind of amazing. Like it just the object permanence, the things looking the same if it changes camera angle, the physics looking realistic and not kind of like weird legs popping out of the dog when it's running, like a third leg pops out every now and then in the front and whatever. It's really impressive. So I was kind of blown away with how consistent and the kind of the physics of it being pretty real.
Yeah, interesting. So, do you think at the end of this story now Google has won? Last week we were kind of speculating between Google launched something and then the next day OpenAI kind of one-upped them, and then now with this launch, it seems like it's sort of universally agreed that this is the better model. Do you think they won this game so far, or
Well,
this
they won
round?
this round.
They
They
won
won
this
this. They
round.
clearly have won this round on the
Yeah.
video generation. But I love having multiple players at the front edge of this. I mean, nothing spurs advancements like competition. And so these guys, I'm sure the OpenAI Sora team is sitting there going, "Well, darn it, we got to go fix that stuff." Like that. I think who really wins is the consumers, the businesses that are going to get access to great models. But I will say, Google slow start. And I would still say generally their consumer experiences are not as well thought through sometimes as OpenAI's, but the quality of the models, and you kind of always believe, I always believe this because Google's been an AI company for so long. At the core of what they do, they may not have called it AI, but these kind of models are part and parcel of what they've done for decades. And I think they're starting to show their chops, and hopefully they've been reinvigorated. I think they were in what's that Ben Horowitz book, wartime CEO, peacetime CEO. I feel like they were a peacetime company, just kind of like casually going along, small updates, AdWords prints cash, and now they feel like the future is here and they're not winning. And it's great to see them reinvigorated and really launching stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of business leaders that want to win and launch some stuff, if we have business leaders listening and they want to go play with this video generator themselves, where can they do that?
Well, so Google's got a site for their new tools called it's at labs.google.com/fx. I'm not sure what FX means. Their image generation, their video generation models there. So a lot of their tools are available there. That's where you can go and play with. Right now, VO is in limited release, so you can go sign up for the wait list to get it. But some other stuff is there.
Great. Well, while you're there at labs.google.fx or /fx, you can also play around with Whisk, which is another new tool that they just launched this week. And it's an image generation model. But instead of just type texting a prompt, you can actually upload a few different images and it literally whisks them together or blends them together to create one combined image. So this is a new take on the image generation game.
Totally. I love, first of all, the whimsical name is kind of fun. Google is notorious for like just naming something exactly what it is. And Whisk is kind of like fun and playful. So I love that. But I have not gotten a chance to go in and play with Whisk, even though it's at the same place as VO. Have you played with it? How does it work?
I have definitely played with it. I actually would recommend if you are tight on time packing for your trip, don't go and start playing with it because it's hard to pull yourself away once you start. But there's a few different things you can do. You can play with the defaults. So for instance, like on the default page, you can enter like make a plushie of whatever your thing is, or make a enamel print or a sticker. But the other thing you could do is you could just go to the create your own, and you upload basically the subject that you want in there, the style that you want, and then any sort of background scene, and then see what you get. When I was playing with it, I broke it more than I would like to have broken it. There was a lot of times that it was just like we can't do this, we can't generate this image. But I played around with what if Jeff and I wanted to make some like cartoon picture of ourselves, to use as like a promo thing for the
Marketing promo
podcast.
material?
So
Yeah.
marketing promo. So the first one I made was a huge fail. I basically, I told it who our audience was in the scene, and it ended up looking like this very creepy cultish type of thing with all these people following us into the sunset. So I scrapped that one. But then the next one that I made was just us sitting inside a podcast studio. The first iteration, it tried to be maybe too realistic, and it didn't, you could tell it wasn't us,
Mhm.
it was AI generated. So I had it just turn us into cartoons so that it was clear that it wasn't actually us. It was just like a
Yep.
picture. And then I asked it to like make me look a little younger and, all of those types of things, make me look happier, that type of stuff,
Wrinkles
make
off,
Jeff look
smiles
happier.
on.
Yeah, exactly. So it was cool. I actually liked doing it. And it was one of those things though, like I said, you could kind of play with it for hours and try different things and see what you get.
I got a long flight to New York, so maybe if there's internet on that flight, I'll go play with Whisk when I'm waiting in the airport to board. It sounds like fun. It is a good reminder of how it takes a while to figure out how to prompt it to get what you want. Like there's a real skill in learning to use some of these tools. They can do a lot, but it's not, it takes some guidance and it takes some experience of like how to get the best out of the model.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's like a really important takeaway for listeners is like if you want to learn about how to use AI, go use AI, right? Because you can read about it and it's kind of confusing, but go actually interact with the tools and play around and see what you can do, and you're going to get creative ideas as you just explore the universe of what's possible, and you'll
Mhm.
see the boundaries too. You'll see where it's like, oh, well, it doesn't work for this thing, but it does work for this other thing. So use the tools is the best way to learn.
Absolutely. Well, while Whisk was whipping up creative combinations in the visual space, Google is also working on something more intriguing, perhaps, in the reasoning space. So, part of this was an experimental release, but Google announced their Gemini 2.0 Flash thinking model, not reasoning, but thinking is what they call it. And in a post on X, Google DeepMind chief scientist Jeff Dean, I love the name Jeff, says the model is, quote, trained to use thoughts to strengthen its reasoning, end quote, and also benefits from speed that comes along with the new Gemini Flash 2.0 model. So I thought this was a really interesting release.
It is interesting, and it sort of reminds me of OpenAI's O1 model. So can you kind of recap for us, like, what is the difference between the traditional LLM and these supposed, like, deep thinking models?
It's fascinating. It take me a long time. I use some LLMs to explain to me how these things work. You go to ChatGPT, go, "What is it? What is the difference?" And it's really interesting. The LLMs are really, I mean, as much as people mock it, it is true that they're next token predictors, right? They just predict the next word, and that can often lead them into kind of corners that they can't get out of. So if you think about a great example that people use to test these models is like a crossword puzzle, and they tend to be really smart. So when they start guessing every word for every clue, you do a crossword, and you're like, "I got that one. I got that one." But then if they get one wrong, they can't they don't know how to go back and go, "Oh, I've got a new clue. I know this is right, and the overlap letters doesn't match, so I'm gonna erase." They can't go back and erase. So they kind of get stuck. But the reasoning models actually kind of go through their reasoning and can reevaluate previous steps and go backwards and kind of oh, maybe this one was wrong. Let me change it and try this. And so that ability to reason back is a very different approach than the purely forward linear approach of traditional LLMs, and allows them to kind of think through a problem in a more holistic way. So it's a very different approach while using kind of the same underlying technology.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a parallel with how humans think, right? And there's certain humans that do more reasoning and some that just get very stuck on their
Certain instances,
ideas.
right, when you want to do more
Yeah.
reasoning, and sometimes you just top of your head answer comes out.
And that's good enough. Yeah. So what are the trade-offs? Why not just use this all the time? I mean, I would think we in general want a tool that's thinking, reasoning, all that type of stuff. Why wouldn't I want to just switch over?
Yeah, it's a good question. They are more expensive to run an inference. So one of the fascinating things about this is historically, not historically, as much as there's historically in the LLM space, but every time we've had an advancement in capabilities for the model getting smarter, it's because we retrained it, right? And they went through a very long, expensive process to train it, and then it's kind of that's as smart as it gets. It ingested whatever it ingested. 4.0 is better than 3.5, but that's the model's as smart as it is. Now it can get smarter by thinking harder, and you actually are taking more time, but that also means more compute and more cost to answer the question. Right now, it's very expensive to train and relatively cheap to answer a question for ChatGPT. And in this case, when you use O1 or Flash 2.0 thinking, it actually um, it actually costs more to do the actual answering of the question. And so I think that's going to be the question for people. Is it worth waiting for an answer because I wanted to think harder? Or does, if I'm asking a simple factual question, speed may matter more to me than this deep reasoning? And if I'm building tools on top of it, is it worth the added expense of the reasoning layer for me as a developer? It could be quite a bit more expensive. And so at that point, like, is that worth it for this particular question or use case? Or do I want to just go with the kind of basic standard model?
Yeah. So what do you think, like, as a user now, we have to make decisions about which one am I going to toggle to when I'm opening up this tool? Do you have a rule of thumb that you use for when you want to use a traditional LLM versus one of these deep thinking models?
I mean, the rough thing is if I'm expecting multi-step reasoning, like I was asking about the format of this podcast or a business idea a friend of mine had, what would you think about the challenges? How would you think about getting started? I want them to kind of think, go back, like really a multi-step rational process. I think is worth using these kind of models for. When probably half my usage of LLMs, if not more, is just simple questions. Where is this? What is this? I don't know this concept. Explain it to me. And I don't need it to reason. I just need it to like spit back information. Also, the reasoning models right now, I think, don't have access to the internet to do search. So if you're looking for up-to-date information, GPT 4.0 can go to the internet. O1 typically doesn't. And so those are good reasons to stick with a traditional model. But then I've been kind of having fun going, what is the hardest kind of question I can send into O1? What kind of difficult multi-step reasoning processes? And can I go back from what might have been 4 or 5 queries to 4.0? I'm developing a marketing plan. What would be the best creative for a marketing X, I'm very small questions. And I go, help me develop a marketing plan for this product and let it, single prompt into O1 where I might have tried to break it up and do a whole bunch of prompts for GPT 4.0. So that's kind of when I tend to break it down. And I'm still like playing with, I'll send queries to both and go, okay, like, did I see a substantially different answer? Was this better or worse? Like, what's the use case? And it's not clear yet when to use which, but I'm sure it will become more so over time.
Yeah, I think that's a like, just on the, topic of playing around with the models and tools, that's one thing that I think is a really good, thing for people to try is take the same prompt and enter it into both both types of models and see what you get. So I was playing around this morning with a question I've answered a bit in terms of like what vendor I should use for a specific task. But I just said, I wonder what, ChatGPT would say about this if I was using 4.0 versus oh 01. And I entered in like, should I use this vendor or that vendor? And so with 4.0, I got basically like, here's the pros and cons of this vendor, here's the pros and cons of that vendor. And it was very much not integrated with like the two vendors being traded off against one another. It was just like a list versus putting it into a one, and then it'll tell you, hey, if your business is in this type of area, then this vendor wins out because of this, reason. And so it was pretty cool just to be able to compare and contrast the outputs. And that's something people can do, practically enter the same prompt and see what you get. You'll see very, very different outcomes.
I'd say even do that across. I do it across different LLMs. Like I'll take ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and just go, okay, here's this. Who gives me what? And it's fascinating when, I mean, it's kind of how I've come to my use cases for them, which is kind of factual stuff to ChatGPT, creative stuff to Claude, and Gemini. I mostly use for the deep research when I want really kind of multi-step research. I think why that's a really good feature. But otherwise, sorry Google, I love the capabilities of Gemini. I use the AI Studio a bunch, but I don't default to the user app very often for Gemini.
Yeah. Well, the Gemini this tool we're talking about, 2.0, it has some other features that some of these other deep thinking ones don't have, right?
Yeah, that was maybe one of the more interesting things. I'd love to get your perspective on this because it actually will display for you its rationale. Like it will show you some of its thinking steps, not just, hey, I'm thinking. If you go to ChatGPT and you don't want to kind of say thinking, right? And it just sits there for a while, contemplating, as we all do sometimes with hard questions. But then this one will actually, Flash 2.0 thinking, Gemini 2.0, sorry, Flash thinking, will actually show you its intermediate reasoning steps and like, why did I do this or that? Which I thought was a really interesting, when we talk about transparency of decision making or AI fairness and kind of how we explain answers. It's really interesting that these kind of model can now explain its rationale to you. That's a really cool feature.
Yeah, I love this feature, and I think actually I hope that the other models like this sort of follow suit and show that transparency, because the ability for the human to actually trust the tool is so much greater if you can see that progression of quote unquote thought that the tool has, and you can intervene if you don't disagree with one of the reasoning steps, right? You can say, oh, like, here's some fact that I didn't tell
Try
you before
again.
that you need to know, try again, right? Because you can see sometimes the output is just so limited by our input, right? The quality of the input is going to very much affect the output that you get. And so you realize maybe in my prompt I left an important piece of context out that the model really needed to know in order to make this inference, that type of thing. And so I really like that feature that this one has of telling you how it's getting to its conclusion. I think it's going to be really important from a explainability and transparency standpoint.
Also, a good reminder for everybody that one of the mistakes I fall into when I'm using these tools for more deep use cases is to kind of just ask the question I've got versus let me write 4 or 5 sentences explaining the context, what this podcast is, what the format, whatever, the things that I want it to know and answering the question. And they really perform so much better if you give a longer query that has more of the context and information that's relevant to you. And it can seem kind of like rambling. I just have this thing I want, but when you're doing something other than like, what is an LLM or some basic question, it really is helpful to put in quite a bit of context. And I always find myself going, make it a little uncomfortable. Get to the point where you feel like, God, it's just saying too much. And that usually gets a much better response from the models than just a quick, brief query.
Yeah. This is often true with human communication as well. The more context you have behind your ask, the better quality of output that you're going to get. So I think that
For
there's a
sure.
lesson to be learned there. Well, from AI that thinks deeply to AI that listens carefully, Google, busy this week, they launched a new feature for their Notebook LM product, which we've talked about a few times on this podcast. And basically, the feature now is that when you use Notebook LM to generate, a podcast, AI generated podcast of whatever your text is, you can actually interrupt the podcast, raise your hand, and ask questions of the AI hosts, which is fascinating.
That is really. Have you done this yet? Have you gone in and asked a question?
I did, I tried it out. Well, you're gonna laugh at me because it was probably the dorkiest, use case I could do, but I basically I always whenever I test out these tools, I wanna try to break them. So I try to come up with, like, really complicated things. So I actually took, the text of 2 laws, 2 relatively complicated laws, TCPA and, TSR, so, Telephone Call Protection Act, telemarketing sales rule. I uploaded the text of both laws into Notebook LM, generated a podcast, and then I would interrupt it and ask questions about a specific use case or practical application, like, "Would this be allowed? Would that be allowed?" That type of thing, just to see what it did, and it was pretty amazing, in terms of its ability to sort of think through the question or the problem was pretty impressive. So
It's such a fascinating capability because I use ChatGPT now a lot when I'm reading. I've got it up and I'm going, oh, I don't understand this. There's this phrase, this concept, this thing that I don't understand, some reference I don't get. Like, and now it's like I have the world's knowledge waiting for me instantaneously to fill in the gaps. Where before I might have gone, shoot, I'm not going to get whatever. It's fine. I would just have gaps in my understanding of some article or something. And this is that the same is now true in podcasts. I mean, the idea that you can, hey, wait, you just said a word that I don't understand, or you just said this thing. Like, can you explain to me that concept of like deep reasoning in a model a little more deeply? Like that's just mind blowing. It makes this a pretty cool tool actually to me. Like it's gonna I may make it into my regular rotation for tools that I'm using.
I think it's a really good thing to put in your regular rotation because some things like I mean, we've talked about before, the text of some things are just really long to get through, and it might be something that if that's part of your job, you'll put in the time, but it might just be something you wanna learn about, and you don't wanna learn about it by reading 140 pages because you don't have the time to do that, or maybe you do wanna do that, and so you just, like, stick it on a shelf somewhere, and then X many months in the future, you get around to picking it up. But so being able to put something like this into a podcast and just interact with it, I think is pretty neat. I also, I don't know if I've said this before on the podcast, but my 17-year-old son is dyslexic, and so learning to read was like a challenge for him. And reading, although he can read, relatively well now, it's almost like when you're speaking in a different language and there's a translation effect that's happening in your head at the same time. So reading is just not the most effective mechanism for him to learn new content. And so this type of thing where I can take written content and put it into something he can listen to, is like such a game changer for him because, we've talked about different types of school use cases. If he's being tested on his reading or on his writing, that's one form of intelligence. But if he's trying to like master a concept, but the only mechanism it is being delivered to him is through this tool of text that is hard to translate, he gets put at a disadvantage. So being able to listen to it, I think, is really important. And I'm excited to have him try this out. I wanted him to try it out actually today, but of course finals ended yesterday. So he's like, school is over. I'm not doing this, mom.
I'm not touching it.
So yeah, so in January, I'm going to have him try it out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So just as a reminder for the audience, there's you can it takes in PDFs, slides, YouTube links, and podcasts are not. Remind me, Andy, but I don't think podcast is the only format that you can get your information. You can get it in audio form, but it'll also give you other kind of forms of interactive or summary information on the content you submitted.
Yeah, you can pick if you want it summary and text, if you want it, turned into like a cheat sheet, if you wanted an audio, you can decide in the audio, do you want it to be something that is interruptible or not? So you can kind of customize the tool for whatever is going to be best for your specific use case.
Yeah, it's kind of becoming my go-to when I have a big document or a big thing. Somebody sends me, I get the like, here's the 45-minute YouTube link on the latest, NVIDIA processor. I'm going, I want to understand it better, but I don't have that kind of time to listen and throw it in and get a nice quick summary. Really useful tool.
Yeah, super interesting.
Well, Google is focusing on making their AI a better listener with Notebook LM. OpenAI is making sure you can reach theirs anywhere. This week, they announced 1-800-CHAT-GPT, a phone number where you can call and just talk to ChatGPT. So there you go. Make a phone call and talk to an AI.
Literally, you just make a phone call.
Just make a phone call. It's kind of like the interactive voice mode. You call in and you get it. They also have it on WhatsApp, so you can text it through WhatsApp. So just I was kind of stunned by this one. Just a phone number, kind of it looks like a tele. If you watch the announcement video, it looks like one of those old telethons.
Yeah.
What's that number again? Please call 1-800-CHAT-GPT. And it's like flashing on the bottom of the screen. It's pretty funny.
I know even just, like, hearing it 1-800 ChatGPT, you have this flashback to the '80s or something. It sounds very
When like
it
10 people with like little rotary phones pop. They actually demoed it on a rotary phone. They put it on like a flip phone, and they had a guy who brought out a red rotary phone, and he's like, "This takes forever. People used to do this."
Oh
Yes,
my
yes, we did
gosh.
used to do the rotary phone, but that it works on a rotary phone apparently.
That is hilarious. Well, given that, iPhone and Android apps sort of already have similar functionality, why this?
I wondered that question too, and I think because if you've got the app, it's a better experience. Like you can get everything that's on the phone number in the app, and I would recommend doing that. But this to me is really a reach into the non-US world. So easy to get stuck in our US centric. Everybody's got a smartphone; they're walking around with it all day. They can use internet wherever they are and have a voice conversation with an AI. And in a lot of parts of the world, that's just not true. And so I think this is really, you know, part of OpenAI's shift from being a development lab into being a consumer company and be as a consumer oriented company producing consumer products. They want to reach as many people in the world as they can. And this is going to, I think, billions of people who don't walk around with an iPhone in their pocket all day are going to be able to now have a voice interactive experience with ChatGPT. So that it took me a while to to remember that they're thinking about not just users at the cutting edge, but how do I make this kind of capability broadly available?
Yeah, I think, they've taken another step in this direction this week as well, making it more accessible, not just with the phone calls, but they've also opened up a new feature that you used to have to be a paying customer to get access to their search feature, but now they've actually made search available to all logged in users, even if you're not on the paid subscription. And so, what it actually allows is for ChatGPT to search the internet and answer questions that you have asked it, whether it's like a specific ask or it's something you think it's going to help you do research to answer. And so this is like another big unlock for them in terms of just making the functionality more broadly available. Again, as you mentioned, across the world.
Let me ask because I found like I ask questions to ChatGPT, and I don't feel like it needs to search the internet very often to give me good answers. What are the kinds of places where you find this useful? Like, what are the kinds of things where you're searching for and going, "Hey, I really want you to search the internet."
I think like the things that are more sort of like time sensitive or timely, where you want to make sure that it has the most up to date information as opposed to like a model that's built on something got retrained on data 6 months ago or 12 months ago or something like that. Anything that is real time flight times and is my flight canceled and what about this trip thing. Or trip I'm having planning for. So anything that you're sort of looking for real time data or real time details, and also anything that you want to actually be able to know the source. Because, like, normally in just the regular functionality, you don't get the source, right? But in search, it tells you this is where I got this information, and so like I mean, practically a flight is a good example. Is this flight available? Well, yeah, here's the website. Here's where you can go click on it, and it says it doesn't go to the agent step. It can't go book it for you yet, as we talked about. That's the future state, but it can actually tell you where it got the information. And I think that's an important functionality for search to be more trustworthy. I think for people to like use it more frequently. I mean, you and I use ChatGPT for things that we're like, we just want this information and we're just playing around and like learning something new and all this type of stuff. But if you really wanted to like use it to do a research project or inform, like students using it for school, they got to cite their sources, right? So like that type of
ChatGPT is not a valid source to
yeah.
cite. You gotta get to where ChatGPT got it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is a useful component here.
Interesting. Well, while ChatGPT is expanding its reach through search and phone, it's also getting a little closer with your desktop applications. So, ChatGPT announced that their Mac app can now work with more applications. So I don't have the full list. I haven't found the full list, but something like 30 apps where it can see the application while you're working with ChatGPT and it can answer, look at stuff, and can work with applications through voice mode.
So again, like we've talked before about assistant versus agent, et cetera, but what does it mean that it is working with my application?
Yeah, so if you've not used it, when you open up the ChatGPT and you have one of the applications that it is compatible with open, there's a little icon. I think it looks like four rounded corners of a square but without the sides. And when you press that, you can give it access to the app, and then it can essentially see anything that's going on in that application. So it works with text edit, BB edit. I think Notes is supposed to be coming with this release. So if you were typing something and you wanted to see the text you're working on, you could copy and paste the text, or now you could connect to the app, and then it would be able to see the information in that application and answer questions about it. Code, it's got several code editors, the terminal, the Mac terminal. So for me, maybe I don't know those who do grep commands, but you got to use what is it called? The kind of query, and I can never remember how to write those damn things to figure out, to search across the files in the terminal. But like now, you can just ask it for how to regular expressions is the name, how to write a regular expression for whatever. So it can now see what's in those applications, which is pretty cool because you can start using it with whatever you're doing on your computer.
And what applications is it working with?
So the ones I've seen are mostly text editing and code editing. And so
Okay.
I think they're trying to expand into notes. They've had text edit and BB edit, Visual Studio Code, and I think they're releasing some. I didn't see the full list of what's supported in there now.
So when I open up my notes app and I'm like, remind myself to research XYZ, now it can just do that for me. I
Yeah,
can
you just load
integrate
up
it and it can go and
ChatGPT,
do
and
the
it'll be
research
able to
and
see what's in there. And the other cool part that they announced with this is the ability to do it with interactive voice mode. So now you can be, typing your text and just literally talking to ChatGPT. What do you think I should? How should I start the next paragraph? What's a good transition between these two bullet points? What are some details I'm forgetting? What's a good replacement word for this word in this paragraph? And it'll be able to see what's on your screen and talk back to you and take your input in voice. So I can see leaving this thing up a lot of times. You can imagine when you're doing work and just want to have a smart person sitting next to you that you can ask questions about what you're doing. It's pretty cool.
yeah, or yeah, you get brain freeze and you want I have a lot of times when I'm trying to decide, in some sort of speech I'm gonna give or conference, like, how is this gonna land with the audience and what do you think, is gonna be a common thing that'll resonate with people? And I usually have like a few core people that I call and ask those types of questions too. But now having this type of tool that's again available 24/7 and can be just there while you're working on the thing, I think is pretty cool.
The advanced voice mode part of it makes it feel so much more like working with a person, not having to type, just leave it open and talk. And now I've noticed that in all the demos, they call it, they use the name chat. So they don't say, hey, chat GPT, they say, chat. And then that's how the chat GPT team seems to refer to the LLM. That's the name they've given it, which is, I feel like I would ask for a better name if I were chat, but whatever.
Hey, chat. I know. I think it's cute. That's not how I use it, but now I've found myself starting to adjust to actually do that. Hey, chat,
I
because
want to give it a
like,
name like Jarvis or something, a little Iron Man reference, or I
yeah,
don't know. Maybe I'll just call it computer, like the old Star Trek. So I grew up on Star Trek: The Next
yeah,
Generation. So computer,
computer.
and just ask a question.
That's pretty funny. Well, moving away from your desktop, getting out into the real world with your wearable AI. Let's shift back to talking about glasses, which we talked about a little bit last week. And so Meta has upgraded their smart glasses, and they just announced three new features, all of which I will say last week I said I didn't get it, but all of these features sound very cool to me. So the first one is a live AI. The second one is live translations, and then the third one is Shazam. So all of these available through your glasses.
Shazam, the music identification service. So I get live translations. I get it. I'm in a foreign country, whatever I'm talking on. Shazam, I hear something. I want to know what is it? What is live AI? What is that capable of?
Live AI is basically it's sort of similar to the functionality we were talking about last week. Like, you have your phone. I think it was Astra, right? You have your phone and you carry it around, and it can tell you what's going on around you. This basically is the same thing, but it's hands free. It's literally on your eyeballs. So let's say you're cooking something and you want to know what is the right cutting technique for this type of fruit, or like I don't know if this ever
Different
happens
cutting
to
techniques. You're already past me. I didn't know there were different cutting techniques. I just cut.
there
All
are
right.
different cutting techniques, and also it's
Oh, shoot.
different fruits. You have to know exactly like which direction and how do I cut this rare type of fruit that I've never interacted with before. So you can put on these glasses and it'll tell you this is how you accomplish this task. So cooking is one example, but imagine like I mean again like you're putting
Anything.
something together, anything you're putting together, and it can kind of be a walk you through tutorial. Men are never going to have to read directions again. They can just put on the glasses and it'll just give them the directions, right?
So give my
Amazing.
wife access to send directions to it all the time in my ear. That'd be. Is this? Do you think this is the future? I mean, is this where this feels like such a version of taking an ultra smart AI into the world with you everywhere, and it can use the video camera, it can see what you're seeing, it can answer your questions. I mean, this. I don't know if we know what the future of devices is, but this feels like. I mean, with this live AI feature, I was kind of like, I got to go buy me some Ray Bans.
I know. I actually I think this could potentially be the future if it is easy enough to use and accurate enough that people want to rely on it, right? Because you just think about, again, like we talked about last week, all of the use cases that today we pick out a phone for, right? We take out our phone to look up this thing or to make this note or to tell me what this is going on or open up Shazam and be like, what song is this? I can't remember, whatever it might be, right? Or I use Google Translate on my phone all the time when trying to talk to different people and I don't know what they're saying. And so if that was just on your face all the time and it could do it for you, um, I think that people would find a lot of use out of that because we found a lot of use out of our phones. So it just makes it one step easier.
I love it. The one thing I'm waiting for all these AIs to do is get better access to my data. I mean, I'm going into a meeting. Remind me, I actually tried this with Gemini yesterday because all my emails in Gmail, and I said, can you just like look up the last 5 email conversations I've had with this guy I'm meeting with tomorrow and remind me like what we talked about, where things are at, what action items there were. Just give me the quick rundown. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm unable to do that. Like it couldn't access my Gmail. And I went, but I feel like that'll be the last piece of this is, can I get to your calendar? Can I get to your email? Can I get to your doc? Hey, I'm calling Annie to prep for this week's podcast. Like, what are the stories that are in there? And like, it should just be able to do that. What time am I calling Annie tomorrow to talk about that? And it's not there yet, but man, if you added that and then put it on my face where I could talk to it all day long and it could see what I'm saying, like it feels a lot like the future. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like the future. And also, I don't know if you got a chance to watch the YouTube video when when Meta first released these sunglasses of just
Mhm.
like or smart glasses, pardon me, the engineering feat to accomplish this was
Make them,
pretty
yeah,
remarkable. But to make them lightweight enough that people could wear them to like take care of the heat situation so that you don't just have this like thing that's
blazing
thinking so
hot.
hard and it's blazing hot right up by your eyeballs. It was a pretty remarkable video to watch just to think through how complicated making these actually is. And so we see it and we're like, oh, cool, it's the future. But getting to the future was no small feat. So if you haven't seen that, I would definitely check it out.
It's a pretty cool video, and it's a pretty cool set of technology, these glasses. And I impressed that they worked with Luxor, Exotica, Ray Ban. Like they look good. Like these are glasses. They look like Ray Bans. They look like Wayfarers, and like they're glasses that you would wear out into the world. They don't look like the Apple Vision Pro guys walking around doing thing
I
with
know
their like big ski goggles on or whatever. It's like they're pretty cool.
I went to Sunglass Hut last weekend because I got, well, spoiler alert. Hopefully, my son's not going to listen to this before the holidays. But I got him a new pair of sunglasses for Christmas, and they had them just in Sunglass Hut with all the other glasses, and they look cool, just
Also
like all
very
the other
smart.
things.
Like great
Yeah.
distribution mechanism. Put them right in the
Yes.
sunglass hut everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
That might be in my future when I'm in New York. Sunglass hut. Here I come.
Check it out.
While some companies are racing to integrate AI into new devices and new interfaces, there's a really interesting debate happening about the future of the development of these AIs themselves. At the NeurIPS conference, OpenAI co-founder Ilya Sutskever stated that AI has reached, and I quote, peak data. And he suggested that there would be a shift to these more reasoning-based systems. So I think that was a bold phrase. We've reached peak data.
Yeah. What do you think that means? Peak data, and how do we know we've reached peak data?
What he was really saying in the talk is if you look at the GPT 4.0 level models, Gemini 1.5, 2.0, they've really consumed essentially all of the text based information in the world that's available to them. Like we've just, and the path to making them more intelligent over time has been collect more data and shove it into the system. And I think what he was saying is we've collected all the useful data. There's no more double the amount of data, quintuple the amount of data and make the model smarter. We have reached the limit or at least close to the limit of how much smarter we can make these models just by shoving more data, at least text-based data into them. And we're going to have to find a new path forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, does that mean we have, GPT-4 now? Does this mean GPT-5 is not coming? I mean, it's not coming until the universe makes a bunch more data for it to make it useful, or what?
I'm sure they'll release 5 at some point. I mean, if nothing else, because it'll be good marketing. But it certainly feels like the expectation for GPT-5 was that it would have been out a while ago. Maybe we don't have the 12th announcement of the 12 days of OpenAI, so maybe that's what's coming on day 12. We're recording it on day 12 today, so we don't have this information yet. But I do think it's been slow. Some of the other next gen models seem to have not developed as quickly. The internal reports seem to be that they're not as much smarter. The scaling law, like, hey, we put in X percent more data, X percent more compute. We are not X percent smarter on all the benchmarks we have. Things seem to be slowing down in the front of being able to do that. One of the things they're trying, of course, is what they call um, synthetic data. Sorry, I lost my words there for a minute. Synthetic data where they have data created by an LLM, and they're like, oh, we'll just have ChatGPT create a bunch more data and then shove that into the training data set. And it turns out having it talk to itself doesn't actually make it smarter. I think there's some places where it works really well. In images and other places, there's places where synthetic data has been really successful, but in the general reasoning and intelligence capability, it seems like that's not been as successful in pushing the limits of capability. So maybe we are just reaching the end of what we can do in peak data.
Yeah, so do you think that, the reasoning-based systems are gonna like, what does that really mean for the future here?
Yeah, I mean, it could be really interesting for these companies. I think it means that they're going to shift to more of this reasoning based approach, the actual changes to the way the model works, not just, hey, let's keep doing the same basic thing, but just shove more data and processing power at it is just probably not going to give them the benefits that they want. At least that's what it looks like. I'm subject to being wrong in 2 weeks when they announce GPT-5 and I look like an idiot. But it seems like there'll be more interesting research on things like Coconut that we talked about last week, that chain of continuous thought from Meta, some of the O1 type models, the Gemini 2.0 Flash thinking type models. And so I don't think there's been as much effort and work put into how do we improve the way the models are kind of working. The interesting part of that from a business model point of view is the most expensive thing for these companies now is to train the model, and then they kind of can't charge you for that. And then they charge you a little bit at the end when you use it, and so the costs for them are very misaligned to the usage. And if we switch to more reasoning based models, those costs are occurred at inference time, so they can actually charge the users who are taking more compute to get better answers more money. So it does shift a little bit the economics and moves away from this huge upfront fixed costs that are causing them all to lose money. The best guesses are that OpenAI is profitable on a per user basis, but not overall, because they got to pay the 20 billion, whatever, tens of billions for the training run. If that training run decreases in value, and all of a sudden it's an inference time, and you can charge people for that, well, these guys could start to become more profitable. So it'd be really interesting to see if that's true, what that does to both the development of capabilities of the model and the economics of these companies that are so upfront cost oriented today, that maybe less upfront cost in the training and more in the inference. And I think that would be better aligned to them economically.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, if you're right, and we have a little bit of a break here before we get GPT-5, that might allow companies that are not OpenAI and Google and Amazon to start thinking about how they're going to apply AI in their companies. And I think that this is a question that a lot of companies that are not AI based companies are thinking about. How am I going to leverage AI, and what am I going to do, and how am I going to oversee it? So I read an interesting article last week, and it was called "Why You Don't Need a Chief AI Officer Now or Ever," and what to do instead. And I think it's good to see people start putting out their thoughts about how do you oversee and implement it in your actual business.
Yeah, you sent me this article, and I found the title really interesting. First of all, because I'm not really familiar with the title Chief AI Officer, although it feels like I might be a nice title. I like the sound of that. But what when they, at least from this author's point of view, what is the Chief AI Officer they're claiming that you don't need?
Well, I think there's been a lot of discussion both at the sort of like at the government level, but then also in the industry level of how to apply some of these discussions of thinking about, do you need one centralized person in your organization that is the czar or the guru on all things AI, and they're sort of the centralized thought leader for the organization about how AI will be deployed or overseen? Or do you want it spread across multiple domain functions and have basically everybody become AI experts for their area, and think through what would be helpful or not helpful in their area? And so that's sort of the idea of, do you want it centralized or decentralized?
Interesting. Is that their argument is decentralized? Everybody should be kind of doing this in their own department versus having some single responsible person for AI across sales, marketing, support, HR, legal, finance, all these different areas within an organization.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they sort of made the parallel to when electricity got rolled out, right? And if when electricity got rolled out, if there was one chief electricity officer that was at every company, and they were like, first we're going to deploy electricity in marketing, and then we're going to move on to the production line, and then we're going to move on to sales, and it would have just really slowed the adoption of electricity, which was just like ubiquitously good for all of the departments. And I think that this person's argument is that if you have this one central centralized person who's sort of in charge, and they're going department by department to think through, first of all, they're not going to be a domain expert in every single department because nobody is. So no matter how much you know about AI, you're not going to be an expert in sort of all of the capabilities that each department has within the organization. And then second, you're going to slow the adoption for certain things. So if you say, hey, I'm the chief AI officer and I'm going to work with my engineers for the next 6 months, well, now your marketing team is 6 months behind the competitors because they have not been leveraging this technology. And so really it's an argument for I think recognizing that this technology has changed the world and we all need to adopt. We don't have, it's not going to be just one or two people or a handful of people that are thinking through the implications of this. This is kind of just the new normal and everybody's got to be thinking about how it applies to them.
Yeah, the other interesting part of the article I thought was the argument that you may not need a chief AI officer, but you do need an AI expert to whom your functional leaders can turn and ask questions, and a thought partner in that probably not going to own the implementation across different silos because it's just not. I don't think that functionally works in many orgs, but it's also pretty intimidating if you're an HR leader who doesn't know a lot about AI to go, hey, I'm responsible for the like. Okay, I got to learn up some stuff, but who's my thought partner to engage in like what works, what doesn't? How do I put the right guardrails on to feel a little more comfortable? So I feel like there is a place for AI expertise within the organization, but it's probably not supposed to be leading the charge on all these efforts so much as being a partner for the functional leaders as they try and lead the charge within their own portions of the organization.
Yeah, I like the idea of having like an AI council, which is basically similar to, we talked a few weeks ago about this study they did at Stanford where they had a bunch of different AIs that were different, had different expertise. Getting an AI council that has different human expertise and somebody who's really deep in sort of like the business logistics versus the ethical things. And so that you have just diverse voices at the table when you're thinking about how you're going to roll this stuff out within your organization. I kind of like that better than having just one person who's the decision maker or the one stop shop thought partner, because it's incredibly complex questions to answer when you sort of dig into this stuff. And I think it's likely too complex for one person to really own. A quick word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Upstart, the leading AI lending marketplace that connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products. Their platform includes personal loans, automated retail and refinance loans, home equity lines of credit, and small dollar relief loans. For more information, head over to www.upstart.com.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. As a reminder for the audience, we will be off for a week. So enjoy your 2-week holiday special episode, and we'll be back in the new year. Annie, I hope you and your kids get what you want for Christmas.
You too. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. This podcast is brought to you by Upstart. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the fundamentals of AI, check out the AI Certification for Financial Services course Upstart released at aicertification.upstart.com. Again, that's aicertification.upstart.com. If you like this episode, please leave us a rating or review. It's the best way to help others find us. And finally, if you have topics you'd like to see covered or questions you'd like to have answered, drop us a line at email@whattheai.fm. That's it. We'll see you guys next time.